He was a trailblazer in his own right. He inspired an entire community of people.
His skill and his athleticism would come up over and over again.
Perhaps he was out of sight for the fans' attention.
As the legend grows, it's just like he's getting taller and taller.
It really strikes a chord with me, knowing that my grandpa was this larger-than-life figure before larger-than-life.
In the 1940s and 1950s, sports writers knew of Fred Thomas in that they recognized that he was the best multi-sport black athlete in our country.
3 sports being baseball, basketball, and football. Baseball came in the summertime, basketball, I guess, in the wintertime. Football would be fall.
He was the first black player to play for the Toronto Argonauts in the CFL in 1949.
He was big, he was fast, he could throw. They used him as a running back or on defense.
The fact that he played baseball and football as well just really shows his diversity in not only his athletics, but also his mindset.
He played center field, right field, anything with speed and arm strength. One of the teams were in the Quebec Eastern League, and he happened to be one of the first to break the color barrier there. When you go to a place where you are the only person of color, you're automatically in a fishbowl. You're being looked at.
He had to know who he could trust and who he couldn't. He never shared any negative stories, but he was always one to say you have to respect yourself and respect other people.
My father, Bill, grew up in Windsor and played with Freddie. I heard many times over the years my dad talk about Freddie, and not only was he a great basketball player, but just an unbelievable athlete as well.
At that time, in the early 40s, the Globetrotters were a remarkable team.
My dad tells it in kind of a funny way. He said the Globetrotters goofed around for about the first 5 minutes and they were behind, and so at that point they then had to start getting serious.
He was facing off against a person a lot taller than him who kind of underestimated his talent and his work.
They're playing a bunch of guys that are competitive and want to win. It became a very tight game, and Windsor won it.
Well, from that game, the Globetrotters, they liked his style, and they invited him to their training camps. Dad was impressed, and he did actually take him out for a couple of years.
In 1950, the NBA drafted or signed 5 players that were black, but had the NBA signed more black players at that time, I believe that Thomas would have made the NBA have and be given a chance.
After his playing career, he also coached. Coaching sort of metamorphed into a teaching career.
I had the privilege of working with Fred Thomas. He was my mentor as a young teacher and became a very dear friend. Fred was great at seeing the strengths in kids and getting kids to work together. Didn't matter the color of their skin, their ethnicity, everyone had something to give. I can remember a couple of situations. He'd have a basketball and he'd just go to the rack, pick one up in his hand, and he'd be just talking to the kids and he'd just put it over his shoulder. And again, it's muscle memory and everything. Swish.
There have been times where I've run into students who've told me the same thing, is that, oh, I remember your dad, he was a great teacher, and it makes me feel really good.
Fred was a very humble person who you had to pry to get in. It wasn't about his past performance. It's what I'm doing currently right now that really matters, and that's why I loved him.
It was an expression from the city of Windsor. It was a very, very touching night. I have a tape that was done, a recording of that night. I put it away and to say at one time, I just want to look back, and listen. And basically, I haven't had the courage to listen to it yet.
Friends, teammates, and a better person for knowing you. And it just makes me feel so wonderful that you people can take the time out to come down and say hello. You don't know how lucky I am. Thank you very much for coming.
I remember afterwards, and he was never really about trophies or anything like that. I remember sitting with him in the living room, and he was saying to me, "This is how you know you've made it." The appreciation that was shown that night convinced him to say, "Yeah, I guess I did do something."
I know that I've been inspired by my grandfather my whole life, despite never being able to meet him.
Some great defense by Garrison Thomas, and slams one down.
I remember back in the 4th grade just wanting to be a basketball player, and once finding out all of these amazing accolades that he had.
I coach now, and I think I coached the way he would have coached. So I want to instill what I learned from my dad to the players that I have.
The connotation of a man's skin, I don't think reflects them as a person. I think that any good-spirited person deserves the right to be seen as such, and I think that Grandpa really emulated that.